I'm Russ Hoffman, and although this says that my company is Evaton Technologies, that's actually not my day job, but I do, as Evaton Technologies, I make Eurorack synthesizer modules. And I've had a Continuum for a couple of years, and at the very first ContinuuCon in Asheville, I was speaking with Lippold towards the end of the conference, and this is just kind of how this uCVC came to be. Let me just back up a little bit. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated from the technical difficulty. What I want to show you is this micro CVC, which is a Eurorack module that directly interfaces the Continuum to Eurorack. And as I was saying, how this came to be is that a couple of years ago at the first ContinuuCon, I talked to Lippold and said, you know, wouldn't it be neat if that big CVC that you have, would you be interested in making a smaller one? And he said, you know, I would really enjoy doing that, but I kind of don't have the time, and I need to find somebody who does this kind of for fun. And I said, hi, I'm Russ, and that's exactly what I do. So that's how we got here. So what the micro CVC is, it's a scaled down version of the CVC, which is the Continuum voltage converter. It's scaled down to a 6 HP Eurorack module. And let me just switch back here. And you can see it right here, in here. And what it does is one micro CVC allows you to track a single finger on the Continuum surface and output 4 control voltages and a gate signal. And we designed it to be expandable to duo. I guess the new word now is duotactic. I've been saying duophonic, but duotactic control. There's a daisy chain cable behind the faceplate. So if you add a second micro CVC module to your Eurorack system, you can now track 2 fingers. The communication is a 16-bit data transfer over a high-speed serial interface called I2C. So it's actually not MIDI. So it's a little bit higher resolution, and Lippold, what is the update rate? I mean, it's much quicker, right?
The bit rate is 400K, but it's a different encoding, so it's basically it's as fast or faster than MIDI, certainly.
Certainly, yeah. Okay. And again, that's to give you that tightly coupled feedback response. Okay. So this is the front panel of the micro CVC, and you can see there's a jack at the top, which is the connection to your Continuum. There's 2 LEDs, which I'll explain in a minute, and 5 jacks. The LED on the right is in the duotactic configuration. Because the 2 modules, they're the same module, just one is configured differently. You need to know which one to plug the cable into. So you plug it into one that's lit up. Actually, I can show you that here. Yeah, you can see this guy's lit up. And so the F LED lights up when the F jack is lit or is active. And Lippold and I discovered a little glitch in the firmware. The intent is that W, X, Y, and Z correspond to what we're familiar with in the Continuum as the 4 W, X, Y, and Z parameters, where X, Y, and Z are by default the left, right, forward, back, and into the surface, and W is are you touching the surface? But W, of course, as the other outputs, can be reassigned in the Eagan Matrix, which is what I wanted to really get into during this talk. And so the F signal is an additional signal which is not present on the full-size CVC, and that is dedicated to always being, is there a finger touching the surface? So this lets you reassign W and still have a finger gate. And there's some use cases where that might be handy. Okay, so here's a photograph showing the connections. The big cable on the left is the connection back to your Continuum. And then in Eurorack, you have these little 1/8" plugs, and those are your connections to the rest of your synth. So new for this year is we had to build a new cable. So this was a couple of months ago. I was really thankful for Lippold for encouraging me to come to ContinuuCon Paris, because I was really on the fence, because it is a big trip for me. And he said, well, can you keep a secret? I said, sure. What's going on? And he says, well, I need you to build me a cable just like the one you have for the micro CVC for the Continuum, but can you put this little tiny connector on the end of it? Because I have something coming out that I think you're really going to like, but it has to have this connector on it. Can you build me one of those and send it to me to test? And please do come to ContinuuCon in Paris, because we're going to have a good time showing this new thing off. And as it turns out, of course, the Continuum Mini is kind of perfect for the micro CVC, because the Continuum Mini is duotactic with 2 fingers, and the micro CVC can be 1 or 2 fingers, and it is limited to 2. You can't plug in 3 micro CVCs and do 3 fingers. There's a hardware limitation there. So if you want to do more than 2 fingers, well, you buy the big CVC. I should back up. So the Continuum Mini connector cable is just for controlling the micro CVC. The one that's for the full-size fingerboard, there's actually a Y cable. It plugs into the MIDI jack. And so you can still, even though you're hooked up to the micro CVC, you still get full use of the MIDI. So if you want to be connected to the editor or some other MIDI device, you can do that while using the micro CVC. In fact, I'm be doing that in a minute as part of the demonstration. So just quickly, plugs into the MIDI out jack on the Continuum. It does not use MIDI. There's 5 pins in MIDI, and MIDI uses 2 of those, so we use the other 3 for the connection to the micro CVC. This is showing, if you have an external MIDI device, you use the through on the cable, so you can hook up your laptop, your iPad, some other synth or something. And when you want to get ready to go, right out of the box, pretty much any preset that I've run into that plays sound also has some sort of default CVC setting. So you will get something. And let me just switch here. Just kind of pull this cable out of the way a little bit so you can see. Okay. So as I mentioned, the F light lights up when it detects a finger. So when I put a finger down, you see that lit up. And the preset that's loaded in here, and I didn't even load a particular preset, when I push this first finger, it's assigning it to that right-hand micro CVC. Now let's see what happens when I hit it again. Yes, it sort of did a round-robin assignment. As I keep just tapping on and off, it's alternating between the 2. But of course, if I put 2 fingers down, it does see them both. And so if you go into your presets, there's a bunch of these that are designed for the CVC, and they're just kind of a get going now preset. And they're named according to which note, what note corresponds to the center of the continuum, and sort of the voltage mapping of the Z. And there's linear and square, and there's some other CVC presets in here for talking to Buchla equipment. And there is even a fun one in there with 4 shape generators, one on each of the outputs. So those are just kind of a quick shortcut. If you don't want to dig into this, you can just go to that and get started really quickly. The next thing you can do is, on open your favorite preset and go to the CVC menu, and you can kind of decide how you want to talk to the CVC. And the neat thing is that the internal sound engine is still active. So if you have a mixer, you can run the output of your Eurorack synth and your Continuum and actually play along, which is kind of fun. Okay. So what I'm going to do right now is show you how this works with a simple patch. And this is kind of the most basic, common synth patch, an oscillator going into a filter, going into an amplifier. And what I'm going to do is control the pitch of the oscillator with the X parameter, the brightness of the filter cutoff with the Y parameter front to back, and the volume of the signal with the Z into the surface. And let me just show you that real quickly. So I'm going to take this X output and use that to control pitch. On this, this is a voltage controlled oscillator. And if I just go really quickly here, let's see here. So you're hearing this oscillator. And I've got no other control hooked up yet. So I'm not, well, it's on autopilot here. So the last, basically the last position is what's kept. So that's not that interesting, but then what I do, okay, so we'll take a little bit longer cable here. So it goes Z into, so I just patched the Z output to the voltage controlled amplifier input. And yeah, actually just do that for now. And you see what's happening is every other note, there's nothing happening because the other CVC has taken it. And so you have to, if you actually have two of these set up, you kind of have to be conscious of that. But let me set up two voices. And so I'm taking the output of the oscillator into a filter now before I go into my amplifier. And I'm going to control that with Y. Let's see, this is a lot messier than a little pin matrix. So, but it's more hands-on, so that's part of the experience, right? Control this oscillator. So I'm just duplicating that left channel into the right. And of course, one thing that this causes you to do is to spend twice as much money on Eurorack because you need two voices. Okay, so just very crudely. And you can see my voices are not tuned the same. So you kind of have to spend a little bit of time setting these two things up. But it's also difficult too, because I'm having this difficulty where I'm alternating every time I touch my finger here. And I'm totally in the wrong octave. So I go into the editor, and let's at least fix. Yeah. Well, what I want to do is actually, let me just go ahead and load my my next preset here, because it's going to be a lot easier. Okay. Right. So what I've got now, and this should work better. Yeah, great. So first thing I need to do is tune my oscillators, because this is all analog. And the way I typically do that that's pretty close. So a couple things are going on here. There's a keyboard split, and I now have it assigned that anything left of the center, and let me just flip back to my anything left of center is now always the left CVC, same for the right. And real quickly then, what that does is makes this very playable. Let's see. A little bit more better tuning here, hang on. And you also have to tune your filters as well. But the split takes into account where the first touch happens. So see, I don't change assignment until I take my finger off, and now it goes to the other side. All right, this is really the meat of the material I want to go through here. So let me switch to the editor. So in this patch, what you do is here in the B bank is you switch this to CVC. And what that does is you have W, X, Y, and Z outputs, and you now assign them kind of freely with anything in the Eagan matrix. And so I've got these couple of formulas here. And you'd think that, you know, I'm sideways. The easy thing to do would just be to assign W, X, Y, and Z. But in fact, you can do some more interesting things. So here A equals W, and W is scaled to 5. And what that means is whenever I get my touch, the output is 5 volts, which is a good Eurorack compatible voltage. Here B is just constant times X, which is going from -1 to 1. Or I'm sorry. Yes. Actually, what I have here is a constant added to X. And this is kind of showing there's two different ways to do things. I'm using that to pick my center pitch by simply adding 4 to the X value. You could also do that just by picking in here, pick where the center value is selected. Same for Y, and here now I've got a Y shelf built in, so I don't get any motion until I get past that, so I have a little place to park my finger. And so you can do things like that to make your performance a little easier to do, or kind of tailor it to the Eurorack patch that you're using. There might be some little idiosyncrasy that you can do these things to make things easier for you. And then on Z, I've got that assigned to going from 0 to 5 volts. You can see it's 0 on the left with no touch, and 5 when you're fully in. And again, Eurorack is 0 to 5 volt control voltages, so that works out really well. Okay. And if we hadn't had our little mishap, I was just kind of going to go through this one at a time. Well, I'll show you anyway. Again, you change to the CVC in bank B, and then you'll see that it switches. The display at the top of the editor shows you CVC via matrix to tell you that the CVC is no longer one of those preset values, but it's now getting it directly from the matrix. And you'll see that that changes to a polyphony of 2, or actually you set that for the micro CVC. And in this case, I went in and I set a split to single below. We only have 2 channels, so that works out well. So the one point I wanted to address, let's see. If I go with a sound that does not have a lot of harmonics, I don't know if you can hear that exactly, but I was running into this when I was creating patches. Even though Z is very, very high resolution, you still get moments when it changes. And you can hear that a little bit, right? So that is where a couple things you can do. If I go down here, there's this interpolation. If I turn that completely off, this gets really noticeable. It was even more noticeable when I was doing this at home. You hear that? And so that's something where you can go in here and just turn that up a bit. And of course, you can go too far. Much less noticeable. And as I say, you can go too far. but maybe that's useful as well. But something to be aware of, and that really only shows up in certain corner cases here, because what's going on is I'm using Z to control the amplitude, and so I'm showing this very, very, very exaggerated what's going on here. But as you make a step change in amplitude, you get this little blip in the output signal. And anytime you have a fast corner in a signal, that means higher frequency content and a little bit of energy there. And so if I'm playing a sound that has very little spectral content, like I'm using a triangle wave going through a low-pass filter, so it's a very, it's not a sine wave, but it's fairly pure. Your ear can pick that out. So one of the things you can do too is use brighter sounds, use the interpolation, and even if just playing in a higher pitch. Because of course those components are even farther up that you can't hear. So that was one of the things that I ran into making some of these CVC patches. let me just see here. Yeah. Maybe 2 minutes? Yeah, okay. So let me just, real quick, I know we're short on time. Having a hard time with the mouse here. Okay. So here's one where I've actually used W as an LFO. And I'm just going to grab this. And okay, so this is a pulse width modulated signal, and I don't have any other LFOs in this case because I'm limited for space, but now I can use that. And you can see I've used a shape generator as a simple LFO, and that is going into my formula A, which has this. You can see there's a shape generator 1 in the W component of A. And so that's giving me that PWM sound because of the maybe easier to hear using that to modulate the filter. Oh. Anyway, so that's something else you can do, and you can do interesting things like use derivatives and formulas. So as you move across the surface, the speed changes the rate of a filter. Kind of all the things you can do inside. So it gives you a lot more control over just the basic stuff. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Does it work with audio rate signals? So if you take a signal from an internal oscillator?
I did a try with a book line 2 weeks ago. So you are entering, if you're like going high frequencies in the audio rate. But you can slowly enter the audio. You can have an oscillator here, and you take the output of the oscillator and send it to the CVC. And for not too high frequencies, it's going to be okay.
Normally, though, you would just take the audio output from the Continuum as a separate thing. So you just do control voltages this way and audio. So you would only you only have 2 outputs from the Continuum. So but since it's duophonic, since you only have 2 CVC modules, it actually works out okay. Yeah. So you use the left and right each as a separate oscillator, which you can set up on the master section of the Continuum.
All right, I think that's...
Okay, so thank you.
Yeah. Just,
That's very right.
yeah.
When you're programming the CVC into the your module for the Eurorack, do you ever use the ancillary functions?
I haven't. Okay. As I said, all of this is kind of a hobby pursuit for me, and I have a very time-consuming day job. So some of these things I've not had a chance to explore myself yet.
But that works well. I did it also in Italy with Alina, who has a huge modular setup, and that works well with ancillary too. Yeah, that's very convenient. So thank you very much for this presentation.
Thank you.
So sorry for